The most dangerous moment in this war didn't happen in Tehran or Tel Aviv. It happened out on the water when ships started burning near the Strait of Hormuz, and the United States discovered something nobody in Washington wants to admit out loud. America can start a fight, but it can't force the world to finish it with us. And that's exactly the point Rachel Maddow has been drilling into Trump. Because once you choose a war that looks optional to everyone else, you don't just inherit Iran's retaliation. You inherit America's isolation. Start with the map. The Strait of Hormuz is that narrow throat between Iran and Oman that connects the Persian Gulf to the open ocean. It's not a shipping lane, it's the shipping lane. In 2024, oil flow through it averaged about 20 million barrels a day, roughly 20% of global petroleum liquids consumption, and about 1/5 of global LNG trade also transited there, largely from Qatar. If you want one geographic pressure point that can shake the global economy in a week, this is it. Now here's the twist that makes Maddow's critique land. The US and Israel struck Iran, and Iran answered in the one place where it doesn't need to defeat the US Navy. It only needs to make the ocean feel uninsurable. That's not a Hollywood line. That's literally how shipping collapses. Insurers walk away, crews refuse, companies reroute, and the open sea becomes a closed business decision. BBC Verify tracked what that looks like in real time. 6 ships attacked in less than 48 hours. 18 vessels attacked since the war began, according to UK maritime trade operations reports and maritime intelligence reporting cited by the BBC. And notice the language, ships struck by an unknown projectile. That phrase is doing a lot of work, because in modern maritime conflict, ambiguity isn't a bug, it's a feature. If the attacker can keep attribution foggy enough, everyone hesitates, everyone lawyers up, and the economic shock spreads faster than the military one. One of the reported incidents involved an unmanned explosive boat ramming a vessel, triggering a major fire, according to Indian authorities cited by the BBC. Another vessel's crew members went missing, believed trapped in an engine room. This isn't just harassment, it's a message to every captain watching those videos. You might get through today, but you might also become tomorrow's headline. And that's how a chokepoint dies, one frightened crew at a time. So Trump did what leaders do when the consequences get bigger than the plan. He looked for other people to carry it. He demanded help, warships, escorts, a coalition to reopen Hormuz. And then NATO, meaning America's own alliance network, basically told him, no, not like that, not for this. Reuters reported that Germany, Spain, and Italy were among the allies ruling out participating in any mission in the Gulf, at least for now. Britain and Denmark signaled they'd consider ways to help, but stressed de-escalation and avoiding being dragged deeper into the war. In other words, they hear the economic danger, but they don't accept Trump's political logic. And Germany didn't just say no. Germany delivered the kind of line that, in alliance politics, is basically a slap. German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius asked a question so blunt it sounded like a strategic verdict. What does Trump expect a handful or 2 handfuls of European frigates to do in Hormuz that the powerful U.S. Navy cannot do? Then he added the sentence that matters even more. This is not our war. We have not started it. That's not just Germany protecting itself. That is Germany publicly refusing Trump's attempt to relabel an elective war as an alliance obligation. And if you want the legal spine behind that refusal, look at NATO's own founding language. NATO was built as collective defense. An attack on one ally is treated as an attack on all. It was not designed as a mechanism to recruit partners into a war of choice after the first missiles fly. Even the BBC quoted former UK Chief of the Defence Staff, General Sir Nick Carter, saying NATO was created as a defensive alliance and was not designed for one ally to go to a war of choice and then oblige everybody else to follow. That's the doctrine argument stated plainly. Now watch the narrative collision Maddow keeps highlighting. Trump talks like U.S. power is automatic, like it's a switch you flip. But the real world is showing the opposite. The U.S. Navy can be the strongest force on the planet and still fail to make commerce feel safe. Because safety isn't just a military outcome, it's a credibility outcome. And Iran understands credibility warfare better than most Americans want to admit. The BBC quoted defense analysts explaining why. Iran can threaten shipping indefinitely in theory, using decoys, camouflage, and subterfuge along a long coastline. Think small craft, robotic craft, small submarines, shore-based missiles, even mobile artillery, systems that are cheaper to deploy than they are to defend against. This is the asymmetry. It costs Iran comparatively little to create risk, and it costs the world a fortune to reduce it. Here's where people get the power equation backwards. They imagine power as who can sink whose fleet. But in Hormuz, power is who can raise the price of insurance faster than the other side can lower it. That's why Maddow's criticism of Trump isn't just moral, it's operational. You don't start a war in a chokepoint region unless you have a plan for the chokepoint. And Allied buy-in is part of that plan, because Allied flags matter in maritime legitimacy. Trump went first, asked later, and discovered the bill comes due in public. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz's government spokesman said Germany will not participate in the war, and not in a military operation to enable ships to pass Hormuz. This war has nothing to do with NATO. It is not NATO's war. Pistorius reinforced, "It is not our war. We did not start it. We want diplomatic solutions and a swift end, but additional warships in the region will likely not contribute to that." That line, "additional warships will likely not contribute," is devastating if you understand maritime operations, because it suggests something professionals know. Escorts are not magic. Escorts reduce some risks, but they don't erase mines, drones, missiles, and explosive boats all at once. They can't guarantee safety to every ship, and once shipping companies believe even one convoy in 10 could be hit, they still won't volunteer their crews. Now add another twist. Trump's own messaging exposes the gap between rhetoric and reality. DW reported Trump writing that affected countries should send ships so the Hormuz Strait will no longer be a threat by a nation he claimed had been totally decapitated. That's the contradiction Maddow keeps circling. If Iran is decapitated, why is the global economy bracing for $200 oil threats and emergency releases? If Iran is finished, why is Washington begging for help? This is where the economic shock becomes the real battlefield. BBC Verify reported oil prices approaching $120 a barrel, with an Iranian military spokesperson warning to get ready for $200 oil. The International Energy Agency, BBC reported, announced dozens of countries voted to release 400 million barrels of oil to offset the effective closure of the channel. That's not routine volatility. That's governments trying to patch a global artery with emergency reserves. And the Strait isn't just oil. The BBC noted other commodities move through it too, inputs like urea used for fertilizer. So the shock doesn't stop at the pump. It hits food chains, shipping rates, and inflation politics. Hormuz isn't merely a Middle East issue, it's an everywhere issue. Now, if you're wondering why Europe is so stubbornly refusing Trump's calls, it's not because Europe is weak, it's because Europe is calculating. The BBC described allies as shell-shocked, hesitant outside the door marked Iran involvement, because they see the danger but also see the absence of a proper, thought-through plan. That phrase matters. In military coalitions, planning is trust. If you can't show a credible end state, what victory even means, partners treat your war like a trapdoor. And here's a fact that quietly humiliates the West. Minesweeping, one of the oldest naval missions on Earth, is now a neglected skill at scale. The BBC noted the last major demining operation at sea was in 1991, and it took 51 days to clear the mines. It quoted Jen Carter saying no Navy invested at the scale they should have, least of all the Americans. So when Iran adds mines to missiles and drones, it's not just escalating, it's exploiting a capability gap created by decades of budget choices. This is why the German defense minister's handful of frigates line hits so hard. A frigate can shoot some things. It can't make an ocean mine-free overnight. And while Trump pressures NATO, the EU's existing naval posture is simply not built for this scale. Operation Aspides, the EU mission launched in 2024 to help safeguard freedom of navigation in the Red Sea, was designed as a defensive mission to protect shipping from Houthi attacks. That mission is modest by design, and it's not a plug-and-play solution for Hormuz. Even Pistorius said Aspides isn't suitable for a Hormuz mission. So when Trump says, "Send ships," Europe hears, "Join my escalation ladder." Now we get to the most politically explosive revelation, because this isn't only allies refusing, it's also fractures inside Trump's own system. PBS, summarizing an Associated Press report, described Joe Kent, director of the National Counterterrorism Center, resigning over the war. And Kent's statement is the kind of internal condemnation that turns a foreign policy crisis into a domestic legitimacy crisis. He said he cannot in good conscience back the war, argued Iran posed no imminent threat, and claimed, "It is clear that we started this war due to pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby." That single sentence detonates in three directions at once. First, it challenges the casus belli. What threat justified the strikes? Second, it implies decision-making capture America being pulled by another state's priorities. And third, it signals that even within Trump's right flank ecosystem, the America First story collapses when the costs arrive in blood, fuel prices, and global instability. Now, you ask the question out loud that many people whisper: is Israel controlling America? As an analyst, I'm going to be careful with that framing because control is too simplistic for how Washington actually works. But influence, massive influence, absolutely exists. And Kent's resignation statement shows how that influence becomes politically weaponized inside U.S. debates. In U.S. politics, Israel is not an external puppeteer. It is a strategic partner with deep institutional ties, intelligence cooperation, domestic political salience, and strong lobbying networks, factors that can tilt policy decisions, especially when a president is impulsive and hungry for quick wins. And the moment that policy produces blowback, people inside the system start naming the influence chain in public. Maddow's broader point, when she slams Trump, isn't that alliances are sentimental. It's that alliances are instruments. If you burn trust, you lose leverage. And what we're watching now is the loss of leverage becoming visible. Allies saying, "Not our war," and the U.S. discovering that coercing partners is harder than tweeting at them. But let's go back to Iran, because the most misunderstood part of this crisis is Iranian strength. Iran is not stronger than the United States in conventional naval tonnage. That's not the claim. Iran is stronger than the system defending global trade routes in one specific way. It has prepared for decades to turn the strait into a layered trap. BBC Verify described the menu: explosive drones, missiles, mines. And analysts pointed out that many smaller weapons can be disguised, hidden, moved, and launched from a long coastline. The BBC also reported images from Iran's Fars news agency appearing to show large numbers of boats and drones stored in underground tunnels, suggesting preparation for exactly this moment. That is not a navy trying to win a carrier battle. That is a force built to make passage unpredictable. And here's the retention-worthy reality people miss. The best place to fight a stronger navy is not in open water. It's in a narrow corridor where geography compresses choices. Hormuz forces ships into lanes. It forces predictable transits. It concentrates traffic. That means Iran doesn't need to search the ocean. It can wait at the bottleneck. And the defense has to be near perfect every day for every ship with no mistakes. The attacker only needs a few successes to make the whole route commercially toxic. This is why claims flying around social media, like dramatic casualty numbers or reports of 200 armed persons killed in a single incident, should be handled as claims, not conclusions. In a maritime war, both sides flood the zone with numbers meant to shape perception. The analytical question isn't which viral claim is biggest, it's what can be independently supported, and what pattern of capability is being demonstrated. What the independently reported pattern shows is clear. Vessels hit, crews missing, tankers burning, fewer ships transiting, and tracking signals being jammed or turned off. That's a campaign of disruption, not a one-off episode. Now layer in the historical echo that should scare policymakers most. The United States has been here before. In the late 1980s, during the Iran-Iraq War's tanker war, shipping and mines turned the Gulf into a strategic choke. The U.S. responded with escorts and retaliation, including Operation Praying Mantis in 1988, after the USS Samuel B. Roberts struck a mine, an operation the U.S. Navy itself records as retaliation against Iranian targets in the Gulf. The lesson from that era isn't the U.S. can't fight. The lesson is, even overwhelming force does not erase the choke point problem if the adversary's strategy is to keep injecting risk. And today, the technological environment favors the disruptor even more. Drones are cheaper, mines are smarter, the information war is faster. Insurance markets react in hours, not weeks. So when Maddow pushes the question, what's the plan? It's not a partisan talking point. It's the central operational question of the entire conflict. Now let's talk about Iran's internal dimension, because you asked for it. How does Iran keep fighting even while taking losses? Iran's model, especially through the IRGC and associated forces, has long emphasized resilience, redundancy, and political control at home while pursuing asymmetric deterrence abroad. The regime doesn't need unanimous popular love to sustain a campaign. It needs enough domestic control, enough elite cohesion, and enough nationalist rallying effect to keep the security apparatus confident. External strikes often allow the state to frame conflict as defensive sovereignty, which can stiffen the posture of core supporters even if broader society is divided. And that domestic posture connects directly to the sea war. Because Iran's leaders understand something. If they can keep Hormuz effectively closed to everyone except select shipments, including, as the BBC reported, a handful of vessels carrying Iran's own oil to partners like India and China, they create a split world. Some countries feel pain, others negotiate exceptions. That's how a regional war becomes a global bargaining game. That detail is crucial. Iran doesn't need to blockade itself. It needs to selectively weaponize access. And that brings us to the most uncomfortable reality for Washington. The countries most exposed to Hormuz disruption are in Asia. EIA estimates that in 2024, 84% of crude and condensate and 83% of LNG moving through Hormuz went to Asian markets, with China, India, Japan, and South Korea as top destinations. So while U.S. politics treats this as a Middle East theater, the economic hostage set is global and heavily Asian. That makes coalition politics harder, not easier, because every state calculates its own exposure and options. Now watch how Iran's strategy pressures Trump from both sides. If Trump escalates along the Iranian coastline, as the BBC reported he suggested, talking about knocking out bad actors along the shore, he risks widening the war and frightening allies even further away. If he de-escalates without a clear outcome, he looks weakened after maximal rhetoric. Iran's asymmetric pressure is designed to make both choices politically painful. And meanwhile, allies are doing something far more damaging than criticizing. They're declining, delaying, hedging. Reuters captured the diplomatic sting behind Germany's refusal. Germany's spokesperson said the U.S. and Israel didn't consult them before the war, and Washington explicitly stated at the outset European assistance was neither necessary nor desired. That's a reminder that coalition warfare is built before the first strike, not after the retaliation. Once you tell allies we don't need you, you don't get to demand their ships when the choke point ignites. So when Maddow slams Trump, the core indictment is strategic incompetence wearing the costume of strength, declaring victory, claiming Iran is finished, and then asking for help to solve the very problem your own decision created. And the Strait of Hormuz is not forgiving. It's a place where even rumors move markets, where one burning tanker can spike global fear, where unknown projectile becomes a macroeconomic event. Here's the final twist. The most powerful navy on Earth is now in an argument with physics, geography, and global commerce, and those forces don't care about presidential confidence. If this war keeps expanding, the question won't just be whether Iran can be punished. The question will be whether the United States can still command the kind of allied trust that makes its power scalable. Because the real nightmare scenario isn't Iran winning a naval battle. It's Iran proving that it can make the world doubt America's ability to keep the world's arteries open. And when a superpower has to threaten its own allies to show strength, it's no longer projecting power. It's revealing the limits of it. So sit with this. If a narrow strip of water can fracture NATO politics, jolt oil toward crisis levels, and trigger resignations inside America's security state, then the biggest geopolitical weapon on Earth might not be a missile at all. It might be a chokepoint, controlled by a country that doesn't need to defeat you, only to outlast your coalition.